The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the Bitter Bluff land office, and Dr. Corinne Bennett stepped down into an argument already in progress. Two ranchers blocked the boardwalk, voices raised. A third man stood with his back to her, hat in hand, shoulders tight with restrained anger. Even before he turned, Corinne recognized the line of his spine, the way he held himself when cornered but unwilling to back down. Cole Carver, trail boss, the man who had asked her to marry him 4 years ago, and then vanished the morning of the ceremony without a word. Her chest tightened, old hurt flaring hot before she could suppress it. She had traveled 800 miles to claim the ranch her aunt left her. She had not expected him to still be in Bitter Bluff. She had certainly not expected him to be the center of a public confrontation. The older rancher jabbed a finger toward Cole's chest. Your water rights end at the fork, Carver. You keep running cattle through Bennett land. You answer to the association. Cole's voice came low and even, the tone she remembered from their worst arguments, the ones where he spoke lightly to hide how deeply he felt. The fork dried up in June, Harlan. You know that. Star Ranch needs the upper spring or we lose everything. Harlan spat into the dust. That spring belongs to Bennett land now. And Bennett land just got itself a new owner. You got no claim. The third rancher stepped closer, hand resting on his belt near a knife sheath. Maybe it's time somebody reminded you what happens to men who take what isn't theirs. Corinne crossed the street in 5 strides, medical bag swinging. Gentlemen, if you are finished threatening my trail boss, I would like to inspect my property before dark. All 4 men turned. Cole's face went carefully blank, but she saw the flash of recognition, the tightening around his eyes. Harlan pulled his hat brim lower. You are Miss Bennett? She met his stare without flinching. Dr. Bennett. I inherited Star Ranch from my aunt 3 weeks ago. I have the deed in my bag and a long list of repairs to oversee. If you have business with my land, you may call at the ranch tomorrow after I have had a chance to review the water rights myself. Now step aside. Harlan exchanged a glance with the other ranchers, then gave a curt nod. We will be calling, Miss Doctor. You can count on that. The 3 men moved off down the street, boots heavy on the boards. Corinne turned to face Cole, fully for the first time in 4 years. His sun-faded hair was longer than she remembered, brushing his collar. His face had more lines, deeper weathering around his mouth and eyes. He looked older, tireder, and achingly familiar. He met her gaze with something between wariness and resignation. Corinne, she kept her voice level. Cole, he shifted his weight, hat still in his hands. I did not know you were coming. My aunt's lawyer sent word last month. I assume you have been managing the ranch in the interim. He nodded slowly. Your aunt asked me to stay on as trail boss 2 years back when her health started failing. I have been running the herd and keeping the place together. She asked me to look after it until you arrived. Corinne felt the old bitterness rise sharp in her throat. Looking after things. That is a generous description for a man who abandoned me on our wedding day without explanation. Cole's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. I am not here to relitigate the past, Corinne. I am here because Star Ranch is in trouble, and your aunt trusted me to hold it together until you came. If you want me gone, say the word. I will pack and leave tonight. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to tell him to disappear the way he had 4 years ago, and spare her the constant reminder of the worst humiliation of her life. But the exhaustion in his eyes was real, and the tension in the street had been real. And she needed answers before she could afford pride. What kind of trouble? Cole gestured toward the edge of town where the land rose into scrub hills. The association is squeezing us out. They want the upper spring for their own herds. Your aunt held them off with legal threats, but now that she is gone, they are pushing hard. Harlan tried to cut our water access twice last month. If we lose that spring, the herd dies, and the ranch goes under by winter. Corinne felt a cold knot form in her stomach. How bad is the financial situation? Cole's expression went grimmer. We are 3 months behind on feed costs. The herd is underweight. We lost 2 hands last week because I could not pay them. If we do not get the cattle to market in the next 6 weeks, we lose everything. Your inheritance will be a pile of debt and a dry water hole. She looked past him toward the road leading out of town, where dust still hung in the air from the departing ranchers. Why does the association want us out so badly? Cole put his hat back on, shadows falling across his face. Because your aunt held the only upper spring rights in the valley. Whoever controls that water controls the whole basin. If Star Ranch folds, Harlan and his friends divide the water and the land. They have been waiting for this moment for 2 years. Your arrival just made them nervous. Corinne adjusted her grip on her medical bag. Then, we hold the spring. Cole gave her a long look, something unreadable in his eyes. You plan to stay? She lifted her chin. I traveled 800 miles to claim this inheritance. And I am not handing it to men who threaten people in the street. If you can keep the ranch running, I can keep us legal. We may despise each other, Cole, but I will not let bullies win. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. I will have the wagon ready in 20 minutes. The ranch is an hour north. We should get there before full dark. He turned and walked toward the livery without waiting for her response. Corinne stood alone in the street, heart pounding, old wounds reopened and raw. She had come to Bitter Bluff to claim her independence. Instead, she had walked straight back into the orbit of the man who had shattered her trust. She picked up her bag and followed him toward the livery, spine straight, refusing to let him see how much his presence still unsettled her. The wagon ride north was silent, except for the creak of wheels and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. Cole kept his eyes on the road. Corinne kept hers on the landscape, cataloging details to avoid looking at him. The valley spread wide and dry. Grasses yellowed, dust rising with every gust of wind. She could see why water mattered. Without the spring, nothing would survive here. They passed 2 smaller ranches, both showing signs of struggle, fences sagging, corrals half empty. Cole finally broke the silence as they crested a low rise. That is Star Ranch ahead. Corinne looked where he pointed and saw a cluster of buildings nestled in a fold of land where a line of cottonwoods marked the spring. The main house was larger than she expected. 2 stories, whitewashed but peeling, with a wide porch and a stone chimney. The barn stood solid, though the roof looked patched. A bunkhouse, a chicken coop, a smokehouse, and a scattering of outbuildings completed the layout. Beyond them, she could see cattle grazing near the tree line, maybe 200 head, thin but moving. It was more than she had imagined, and worse than she had hoped. Cole pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Your aunt kept the house clean. I moved into the bunkhouse when she got sick. You will have privacy. Corinne climbed down without waiting for help. I am a doctor, Cole. I am not afraid of hard work or proximity to hired men. Where are the hands now? He tied off the reins and lifted her trunk from the wagon bed. 2 are out with the herd. 1 is in town picking up supplies. That is all we have left. Your aunt used to run this place with 8 hands and a cook. Corinne took her medical bag and started toward the house. Then we will make do with what we have. Cole followed with the trunk. You should know the association is not going to wait long. Harlan is the type to push until something breaks. If he thinks you are vulnerable, he will move fast. She paused on the porch steps and looked back at him. What would you recommend? His gaze was steady, unreadable. I would recommend you hire someone you trust to watch your back. I know I am not that person anymore. But until you find one, I will do the job. She did not answer, just pushed open the front door and stepped inside. The interior smelled of dust and old wood and faintly of lavender, her aunt's favorite. The furniture was plain, but well made. The floors scrubbed, the windows clean. Corinne set her bag on the table and looked around, feeling the weight of memory and responsibility settle on her shoulders. Her aunt had built this place from nothing after her own failed marriage. She had held it against drought and debt and the land association for 20 years. Now, it was Corinne's turn, and she had no idea if she was strong enough to do the same. Cole set the trunk down near the stairs. I will be in the bunkhouse if you need anything. There is food in the larder and firewood stacked by the stove. She turned to face him, needing to say it before she lost her nerve. Why did you leave, Cole? He went very still, hat in his hands again, shoulders tight. That is a long conversation, Corinne. She crossed her arms. I have time. He looked at her for a long moment, something painful moving behind his eyes. Then he shook his head. Not tonight. Tonight you need rest, and I need to check the herd. We can talk about old wounds when we are not both exhausted. He left before she could argue, boots heavy on the porch, the door closing softly behind him. Corinne stood alone in her aunt's house, frustration and exhaustion warring in her chest. She had wanted answers for 4 years. She had imagined the confrontation 1,000 times. But now that she was here, now that he was close enough to demand the truth, she found herself almost afraid to hear it. She unpacked her trunk, stored her medical supplies, made up the bed in her aunt's old room, and tried not to think about Cole sleeping 100 yards away in the bunkhouse. She tried not to remember the way he had looked at her in the street, wary but not cold, guarded but not indifferent. She tried not to feel the pull of old attraction beneath the hurt. She failed on all counts. That night, she lay awake listening to the wind in the cottonwoods and the distant sound of cattle moving in the dark, and wondered how she was going to survive working beside the man who had broken her heart. Morning came too early, pale light spilling through the thin curtains. Corinne, dressed in her most practical riding skirt and blouse, pinned her hair tightly, and went downstairs to find Cole already at the kitchen table with a pot of coffee and a stack of papers. He looked up when she entered. I thought you might want to see the books. She poured herself coffee and sat across from him. Show me. He spread the ledgers out between them, pointing to columns of numbers that told a grim story. Feed costs, vet bills, lost stock, unpaid wages. Your aunt was meticulous, but the numbers do not lie. We are bleeding money. If we do not get the herd to market by mid-September, We default on 3 loans and lose the land. Corinne scanned the entries, her medical training making her comfortable with detailed records. How much do we need to break even? Cole tapped a figure near the bottom. $4,000. That is what we get if we deliver 200 head in decent condition to the railhead in Dodge. But we have to get them there first, and that means a 3-week drive through disputed territory. Harlan's men have been harassing drovers all summer. Corinne looked up sharply. Would he actually try to stop us? Cole's expression was grim. He would try to scatter the herd, spook them into a stampede, or delay us long enough that we miss the buyer's deadline. If he can make us fail without leaving evidence, he will. She set down her coffee cup. Then we do not give him the chance. We move fast, we move smart, and we make sure he does not see us coming. Cole leaned back in his chair, studying her. You sound like you are planning to come on the drive. She met his gaze evenly. I am the owner. Where else would I be? He shook his head. A cattle drive is not a place for someone without experience, Corinne. It is dangerous, exhausting, and dirty. You will slow us down. Anger flared hot in her chest. I am a doctor, Cole. I have set bones, delivered babies, and stitched knife wounds in the back of a moving wagon. I am not a decorative addition. If you think I am going to sit here while you risk my inheritance on the trail, you are badly mistaken. He held up a hand. I am not questioning your courage. I am questioning your riding stamina and your knowledge of cattle. Have you ever worked a herd? She lifted her chin. No, but I learn fast, and I can shoot. Also, if anyone gets injured, you will need a doctor. That alone justifies my presence. Cole sighed and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their old arguments. You are as stubborn as your aunt. She almost smiled. I will take that as a compliment. He stood and carried his cup to the counter. Fine. You come on the drive, but you follow orders. You stay out of the way when things get rough, and you do not take risks I have not cleared. This is not about pride, Corinne. This is about survival. She stood as well, meeting him across the small kitchen. Agreed. But you do not shut me out of decisions. If this ranch is mine, I need to understand how it works. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Deal. Now finish your coffee. We ride out to check the spring in an hour. I want you to see what we are fighting for. They rode north through dry grass and scattered junipers, the sun climbing hot and bright. Corinne had not been on a horse in 2 years, but the rhythm came back quickly, her body remembering the balance and sway. Cole rode ahead, checking fence lines, marking places where repairs were needed. He moved with easy confidence, part of the landscape in a way that made her chest ache. She had fallen in love with that confidence once. The way he seemed to belong so completely to the wild places. She had thought he might build a life with her. Instead, he had walked away. She pushed the thought aside and focused on the land. The valley stretched wide, rising into low hills on the east and dropping toward a distant river on the west. Dust devils spun across open ground. Vultures circled high and lazy. The heat was relentless. They reached the spring an hour later, where the cottonwoods grew thick and the ground turned damp and green. Water bubbled up from a crack in the rock and spilled into a shallow basin before running off in a narrow stream toward the ranch. It was not much, A trickle compared to the rivers Corinne had seen back east. But here it was, life itself. Cole dismounted and crouched beside the basin, checking the flow. Still steady. That is good. Harlan has not managed to divert it yet. Corinne slid down from her saddle and walked to the edge of the water. How would he divert it? Cole pointed upstream where the rock rose higher. If he dams the source or dynamites the channel, the water goes underground and we lose access. It is illegal. But proving he did it would take months in court. By then, we would be finished. She knelt beside him, close enough to feel the heat of his shoulder. Can we guard it? He shook his head. We do not have enough hands. The best we can do is check it daily and hope he waits until after we move the herd. Corinne dipped her fingers in the cool water, feeling the current tug gently. My aunt fought for this spring for 20 years. I am not going to lose it in 6 weeks. Cole looked at her, and for the first time since her arrival, she saw something other than wariness in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Your aunt would be proud of you. Corinne met his gaze and felt the air tighten between them, awareness flickering beneath the surface of their careful distance. She pulled her hand from the water and stood quickly. We should head back. You said there were repairs to oversee. They rode back in silence, but the silence felt different now, charged with things unsaid. When they reached the ranch, 2 riders were waiting by the barn. Corinne recognized the older one as the man Cole had argued with in town. Harlan. The second man was younger, lean and hard-eyed, a rifle slung across his saddle. Cole dismounted slowly, deliberately keeping his movements calm. Harlan. Did not expect you so soon. Harlan smiled without warmth. Just being neighborly, Carver. Thought I would welcome the new owner proper-like. He touched his hat brim toward Corinne. Miss Doctor. Hope you are settling in all right. Corinne stayed in the saddle, keeping the height advantage. I am. Thank you for the concern. Harlan's smile widened. Glad to hear it. I also thought I should mention, the association is holding a vote next week on water allocations. Might be we decide Star Ranch's claim to the upper spring is not as strong as we thought. Cole stepped forward, positioning himself between Harlan's horse and Corinne's. The deed is clear, Harlan. Star Ranch holds the upper spring rights. The association does not have the authority to overturn a legal claim. Harlan shrugged. Law is one thing. Reality is another. You got 2 hands and a lady doctor trying to run a ranch that used to need 8 men. Accidents happen. Fences break. Cattle wander. Sometimes people get hurt. Would be a shame if something happened that could have been avoided. Corinne felt cold fury rise in her chest. Are you threatening us, Harlan? He spread his hands in mock innocence. Just stating facts, Miss Doctor. This is hard country. People who are not prepared tend to struggle. Now, if you were willing to sell your water rights to the association, we could make sure you stay safe, and even help you get a fair price for the ranch when you decide to move on. Corinne urged her horse forward until she was looking down directly into Harlan's face. I am not selling, and I am not moving on. If you have legal concerns, take them to the land office. If you have threats, keep them to yourself. This conversation is over. Harlan's expression went cold. You are making a mistake. Cole's voice came low and dangerous. You heard her. Time for you to leave. The younger man shifted his rifle slightly, not quite pointing it, but making the threat visible. Harlan looked between Corinne and Cole, then spat into the dust. "We will see how long your courage lasts, Miss Doctor. Come on, Ray." He turned his horse and rode out, the younger man following. Corinne waited until they were out of sight before dismounting, her hands shaking with adrenaline. Cole caught her elbow, steadying her. "You all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He let go quickly, stepping back. That was well done. Most people fold when Harlan pushes. She found her voice. "He is going to make trouble." Cole's jaw tightened. "Yes. The question is when and how. We need to move the herd as soon as possible. Can you be ready to leave in 3 days?" Corinne looked at the ranch, at the house and barn and the cattle grazing beyond, and felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper. 3 days. I will be ready." Cole nodded. "Then we have a lot of work to do." He walked toward the barn, leaving her standing alone in the yard, heart still pounding. Knowing she had just crossed a line there was no uncrossing. The next 3 days blurred into exhausting preparation. Corinne learned to check tack, pack supplies, handle the remuda horses, and read the herd's mood. Cole worked her hard, testing her limits without apology. She woke before dawn, worked until dark, and fell into bed too tired to dream. The 2 remaining ranch hands, Sam and Jericho, were taciturn but fair, watching her with cautious curiosity. By the 3rd day, she could saddle her own horse, rope a fence post, and ride for 6 hours without collapsing. It was not enough, but it would have to be. On the evening before the drive, Cole called everyone to the porch for final instructions. "We move at first light. The plan is to push hard for 2 days, get past Harlan's range before he can organize resistance, then settle into a steady pace toward Dodge. Sam, you ride point. Jericho, you take the drag. Miss Bennett and I will work the flanks and handle any trouble that comes up. We are short-handed, so everyone pulls double duty. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Our only job is to get these cattle to market alive. Understood?" Sam and Jericho nodded. Corinne met Cole's eyes and nodded as well. He held her gaze for a moment, then looked away. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be brutal." The men dispersed toward the bunkhouse. Corinne stayed on the porch, watching the last light fade behind the hills. Cole came back a few minutes later with 2 tin cups and a pot of coffee. "Thought you might need this." She took the cup gratefully. "Thank you." He leaned against the porch rail, looking out at the darkening land. "You did well these last 3 days. Better than I expected." She sipped the bitter coffee. "You did not expect me to last." He almost smiled. "I expected you to fight harder against the work. You always were good at getting your way." She set down her cup. "You say that like it is a weakness." He shook his head. "It is not. It is what makes you dangerous. You decide what you want, and you do not stop until you get it. I admired that about you. Still do." The past tense hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. Corinne looked at him directly. "Cole, why did you leave 4 years ago?" He went very still, the coffee cup motionless in his hands. Then he sighed and set it on the rail. "Because I was a coward." The answer was so unexpected she had no response ready. He continued before she could recover. "We were supposed to get married. I wanted that. I wanted you. But the night before the ceremony, your father came to see me. He told me you deserved better than a drifter with no prospects and no family name. He said if I truly cared about you, I would let you build the life you were meant for. A doctor's life, not a trail boss's wife stuck on a failing ranch. He offered me money to disappear. I refused. But his words got inside my head. I started thinking about what I could actually give you. A hard life. Isolation. Constant struggle. I thought maybe he was right. Corinne felt her throat tighten. So you left. Cole looked at her, and she saw the old wound in his eyes, raw and unhealed. I left because I thought it was the kind thing. I thought you would be angry for a while, then relieved. I thought you would move on and build the life you deserved. Instead, I hurt you in the worst possible way, and I have regretted it every day since. I am sorry, Corinne. I know that does not fix anything, but it is the truth. She stood very still, feeling 4 years of anger and hurt crack open to reveal something more complicated underneath. Loneliness. The same loneliness she saw in his face now. My father had no right to interfere, and you had no right to make that choice for me. If you had doubts, you should have talked to me. We could have worked through it together. Cole nodded slowly. You are right. I was young and stupid, and too proud to admit I was scared. I thought walking away was noble. It was just cruel. Corinne wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the evening chill. After you left, I told myself I would never let anyone have that kind of power over me again. I built my practice. I focused on my work, and I convinced myself I did not need anyone. But it was lonely, Cole. I was so lonely. He took a step closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. I know. I was lonely too. Still am. Your aunt gave me a purpose, something to care for. But it was not the same as what we almost had. Corinne looked up at him, seeing past the weathered face to the man she had almost married. Do you still think I deserve better? He met her eyes, and she saw something shift in his expression, walls coming down. I think you deserve someone who will not run when things get hard. Someone who will fight beside you instead of making choices for you. I do not know if I am that man yet, but I am trying to be. She reached out and touched his hand briefly, a fleeting connection. Then prove it on this drive. Help me save this ranch, and maybe we can figure out what comes after. He turned his hand to catch hers, just for a moment, warm and rough and solid. Deal. They stood together in the gathering dark, the air between them still fragile but no longer quite so broken. Then Corinne pulled her hand back gently. Get some rest, Cole. Tomorrow is going to be brutal. He smiled, a real smile this time, and it hurt to see how rare it was. Yes, ma'am. He left her on the porch, and she listened to his footsteps fade toward the bunkhouse, her heart beating hard. The drive began in darkness, the herd moving slow and uneasy under the stars. Corinne rode flank beside Cole, learning to read the cattle's mood, watching for stragglers, listening for the sounds of trouble. By midday they had covered 10 miles, the sun beating down relentless, dust rising in choking clouds. Her throat was raw, her hands blistered, her back aching, but she did not complain. Cole worked beside her without comment. correcting her mistakes with brief gestures, trusting her to learn fast. By the second day, she was anticipating problems before he called them out. The herd settled into a steady rhythm, and for brief stretches, the work felt almost easy. Then the storms came. The sky went dark green in the west, clouds boiling up fast. Cole rode hard down the line, shouting orders. "Storm coming. Tighten the herd. Get them into the draw." Corinne spurred her horse forward, pushing the nearest cattle toward the shelter of a shallow ravine. Rain hit like a wall, cold and hard, soaking her in seconds. Lightning cracked close, the thunder instant and deafening. The herd panicked, bellowing and surging, threatening to stampede. Corinne fought to turn them, her horse slipping in the mud, rain blinding her. She heard Cole's voice cutting through the chaos. "Hold the left flank. Do not let them scatter." She drove her horse into the press of cattle, using her weight and voice to turn them, every instinct screaming that she was about to be trampled. Then Cole was beside her, his horse shoulder to shoulder with hers, his voice steady and commanding. "Easy. Push them slow. You are doing fine." Together they turned the led steers, and the rest of the herd followed, funneling into the ravine where the banks offered some shelter. The rain kept coming, brutal and unrelenting. Corinne lost track of time, focused only on keeping the cattle contained, keeping her horse steady, staying alive. When the storm finally broke an hour later, she was shaking with exhaustion and cold. Cole rode close, checking her over with quick efficiency. "You hurt?" She shook her head, teeth chattering. "Just cold." He pulled a rolled slicker from his saddle and handed it to her. "Put this on. We have a few hours before the next cell hits." She took the slicker gratefully. "What about you?" He shook his head. "I will manage." "You did good back there, Corinne. Most people freeze the first time a herd panics. You held the line." She pulled the slicker around her shoulders, warmth flooding back slowly. "I was terrified." He smiled grimly. "That is what kept you sharp. Fear makes you careful. Overconfidence gets you killed." They rode back to check the herd, counting heads, looking for injuries. They had lost 3 steers, and 1 horse had pulled up lame. But it could have been much worse. Sam and Jericho were soaked, but unharmed. They made camp in the ravine, too wet to start a fire, eating cold beans and hardtack while the sky rumbled threats overhead. Corinne sat beside Cole, close enough to share body heat, too tired to maintain careful distance. He handed her a canteen. "Drink. You are going to be sore tomorrow." She drank and handed it back. How much farther to safe ground? 2 more days if the weather holds. 1 week if it does not. Harlan's range ends at the big river. Once we cross that, the worst is behind us. She leaned back against a rock, feeling every bruise and scrape. "Tell me something, Cole. When you came back to Bitter Bluff, did you know my aunt had left me the ranch?" He was quiet for a moment, rain dripping from his hat brim. "No. I thought the ranch would go to her daughter back east. When the lawyer told me you were the heir, I almost left again." "Why did you stay?" He looked at her, eyes shadowed under his hat. "Because running did not fix anything the first time. I figured maybe facing you would." She held his gaze, rain-soaked and exhausted and achingly aware of him. "And now that you have faced me?" He reached out and brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek, the touch brief and careful. Now I am trying to figure out if I have any right to ask for a second chance. Her breath caught. Cole. He pulled his hand back. I am not asking tonight. Tonight we are just trying to survive. But when this drive is over and the ranch is safe, I am going to ask. You do not have to answer now. Just know it is coming. She nodded, unable to speak, her heart pounding in her chest. They sat in silence while the rain fell and the herd shifted restlessly nearby. And Corinne felt something fragile and fierce building between them, born of shared danger and hard-won trust. The storm passed by morning, leaving the ground treacherous and the herd skittish. They pushed on, mile by muddy mile, tension rising as they neared the river crossing. Harlan's men were out there somewhere, watching and waiting. Cole doubled the watch, riding ahead to scout for ambush points. On the fourth day, they reached the river just before dusk. The water was high from the rain, running fast and brown. Cole studied it for a long time, jaw tight. We cross at first light. The current is too strong to risk in the dark. They made camp on the near bank, the herd bunched tight, everyone on edge. Corinne checked the horses, redistributed supplies, cleaned her rifle, anything to keep her hands busy. Sam came to stand beside her. You are holding up better than I expected, Miss Bennett. She managed a tired smile. That is a low bar. He chuckled. Fair point. But for what it is worth, you are tougher than most of the men I have worked with. Cole knows it too. I see the way he looks at you, like he is remembering something he lost. Corinne glanced toward the river, where Cole stood alone, watching the water. He made a mistake 4 years ago. We both did. Sam nodded. Reckon you are both getting a chance to fix it. That is more than most folks get. He walked back toward the fire, leaving her with the thought. She finished cleaning the rifle and walked down to the river where Cole stood. The water roared past, powerful and indifferent. He did not turn when she approached. You worried about the crossing? He nodded. The current is strong. If the herd panics halfway across, we could lose them all. She stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. What do you need me to do? He finally looked at her. Stay upstream. If anyone goes in, you are the strong swimmer. I need you positioned to pull them out. She met his eyes. I can do that. He studied her for a moment. I know. That is why I am asking. They stood together watching the river until full dark, neither willing to voice the deeper fears they both carried. That night, Corinne lay awake in her bedroll, listening to the water and the restless herd, thinking about the crossing ahead and the man who had finally told her the truth. She thought about second chances and whether trust, once broken, could ever fully heal. She thought about her father, who had interfered where he had no right, and her younger self, who had been too hurt to demand answers. She thought about Cole, lonely and trying, still fighting to prove he was worth the risk. Sleep came late and shallow, full of dreams of deep water. They crossed at dawn, the herd balking at the river's edge. Cole rode point, plunging in first, his horse chest deep in the surging current. Sam and Jericho flanked the herd, driving the cattle forward with shouts and rope cracks. Corinne positioned herself upstream as ordered, watching for trouble. The led steers entered the water reluctantly, then committed, swimming hard. The rest followed in a surging mass. Halfway across, a young steer panicked and turned back, crashing into the others. The herd bunched and milled, bellowing, the current pushing them downstream. Cole fought to turn them, his horse struggling. Corinne saw the moment it went wrong. A wall of debris, tree branches and fence posts from the storm, came sweeping down the river straight toward the herd. Cole shouted a warning, but the debris hit before anyone could react. Cattle scattered. Some pushed under, others swept downstream. Cole's horse went down, throwing him into the current. Corinne spurred her horse forward without thought, driving into the water upstream of where he went under. She saw him surface 20 yards downstream, fighting the current, weighed down by coat and boots. She angled her horse to intercept, leaning low, extending her arm. "Cole! Grab on!" He caught her wrist as the current swept him past, the impact nearly pulling her from the saddle. She locked her legs and held on, her horse straining against the weight. For a terrible moment, she thought they would both go under. Then, her horse found footing on a submerged sandbar, and she pulled Cole close enough to grab the saddle. She hauled him up behind her, his weight threatening to topple them both, her arms screaming. He coughed water and clung to her waist. "Get to the far bank." She drove her horse forward, fighting the current, every step uncertain. Behind them, Sam and Jericho were pulling the herd back together, but she could not look back. She focused on the far bank, on keeping her horse moving, on the feeling of Cole's arms tight around her middle. They reached shallow water, and her horse lunged up onto the mud. Cole slid off, collapsing on his hands and knees, coughing violently. Corinne dismounted and knelt beside him. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head, still coughing. "You saved my life." She gripped his shoulder, shaking with reaction. "You are welcome. Now breathe." He sat back on his heels, water streaming from his clothes, and looked at her with an expression so raw it stole her breath. "Thank you." She nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. They stayed there on the muddy bank, while the rest of the herd struggled across, while Sam and Jericho drove the cattle up onto solid ground, while the danger slowly receded. Finally, Cole got to his feet, swaying slightly. "We lost maybe a dozen head. Could have been worse." Corinne stood as well, exhaustion hitting her hard. "Could have lost you." He looked at her for a long moment. "But you did not let that happen." She met his gaze, seeing the shift in him, the way the last walls were coming down. "No, I did not." They pushed on through the day, putting distance between themselves and the river. By nightfall, they were across Harlan's range and into open territory. The worst of the external threats had passed. Now it was just endurance, the long, slow grind toward Dodge. Cole's horse had been found downstream, bruised but sound. They settled into a rhythm, the days blending together, sunrise to sunset, dust and sweat, and the constant low mutter of the herd. Corinne's hands toughened, her seat in the saddle becoming second nature. She and Cole worked side by side, falling into an easy partnership born of shared struggle. At night, they sat by the fire and talked, carefully at first, then with growing honesty. She told him about the loneliness of her medical practice, the way she had thrown herself into work to avoid feeling the ache of his absence. He told her about the trail drives and failed ranches, the way he had kept moving to avoid settling anywhere that reminded him of what he had lost. They circled closer to the real question, the one neither was quite ready to ask aloud. On the 8th night out, with Dodge still 4 days away, Cole asked her about her father. "Do you still talk to him?" Corinne shook her head. "I wrote him after I finished medical school. Told him I did not need his approval or his interference. He wrote back once, said he had acted in my best interest. I never replied." Cole poked at the fire with a stick. "I am sorry he came between us." She looked at him across the flames. "He gave you an excuse, but you made the choice. I have forgiven you for leaving. I am still working on forgiving you for not trusting me enough to stay." He nodded slowly. "That is fair. For what it is worth, I trust you now. I have seen you face down Harlan, survive a stampede, and pull me out of a river. You are the strongest person I know, and I was a fool to think you needed protecting." She felt warmth spread through her chest, softening the old hurt. "That is the first time you have said it outright. That you were wrong." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I was wrong, Corinne. About everything. You were never fragile. You were never someone who needed a perfect life handed to you. You were always someone who fought for what you wanted. I should have fought beside you instead of running." She smiled, small and cautious. "You are fighting now." He smiled back. "I am trying." She stood and walked around the fire, sitting down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Keep trying. I think it is working." They sat together in comfortable silence while the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead. Corinne felt the last pieces of her anger dissolve, replaced by something gentler and more dangerous. Hope. The possibility that what they had almost built 4 years ago might still be within reach. Cole shifted slightly, his hand brushing hers where it rested on the ground between them. She turned her hand palm up, and he laced his fingers through hers. They sat like that until the fire died, neither speaking, both holding on. The last days to Dodge passed without incident. The herd was lean but steady, the hands exhausted but hopeful. They reached the railhead on a bright September morning, the pens already filling with cattle from other drives. Cole negotiated with the buyer, a hard-eyed man in a fine suit who walked the herd twice before nodding. 200 head, fair condition. "I will give you 3,800. Cole countered. 42. "You know the market is good." The buyer smiled thinly. 40. "Final offer." Cole glanced at Corinne. She nodded. He shook the buyer's hand. "Deal." The money would be wired to the bank in Bitter Bluff within the week. It was enough to cover the debts, pay the hands, and buy feed for winter. The ranch was saved. Sam and Jericho let out tired whoops. Corinne felt relief so intense it left her shaky. Cole walked over to where she stood by the fence, dust coating both of them, exhaustion written in every line of their bodies. "We did it," she smiled. "We did." He looked at her for a long moment, then took off his hat. "Corinne, I told you I would ask when the drive was over." She felt her heart start to pound. "I remember." He took a breath. "I know I do not deserve a second chance. I know trust takes time to rebuild. But I am asking anyway. Will you let me court you properly? Let me prove I am not going to run again? Let me show you I am serious about building a life with you?" She looked at him. dusty and weathered and more handsome than he had any right to be, and felt the last of her defenses fall. Yes, but I have conditions. He almost smiled. I expected that. She stepped closer. First, no more making decisions for me. If you have doubts, you talk to me. Second, you stay at Star Ranch as a full partner, not just a hired trail boss. We build it together or not at all. Third, you accept that I am a doctor and my work matters as much as yours. If someone needs help, I go. You do not get to keep me safe at the cost of someone else's life. He listened carefully, then nodded. All fair. Do I get to add a condition? She raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. He took her hand. You give me a chance to show you I have changed. Not just with words, but with time. Let me earn your trust back day by day. If I fail, you tell me. No second guessing, no silent resentment. We talk it through, or we walk away clean. She squeezed his hand. Deal. He smiled, a full, genuine smile that lit his whole face, and pulled her close enough to rest his forehead against hers. Thank you. She closed her eyes, breathing him in, dust and sweat, and the faint smell of horse. You are welcome. Now let's go home. They rode back to Bitter Bluff together, slower this time, no herd to drive, no deadline pressing. They talked and laughed and planned, the weight of the past finally lifting. Sam and Jericho rode ahead with the remuda, giving them space. The land opened wide and golden under the late summer sun, full of promise. By the time they reached Star Ranch, the shadows were long and the air was cooling. Corinne dismounted in front of the house and looked at the place with new eyes. Hers. Theirs, maybe, if they could build it right this time. Cole dismounted beside her. What are you thinking? She smiled. I am thinking we have a lot of work ahead. The house needs repairs. The barn needs a new roof. We need to hire more hands before winter. He stepped close, tucking a stray piece of hair behind her ear. We will manage. We have time. She looked up at him, seeing the man who had finally stopped running, who had fought beside her and earned his way back into her life. We do. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. His kiss was gentle and careful, tasting of dust and hope and new beginnings. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. I have been wanting to do that for 4 years. She laughed softly. It was worth the wait. Over the next weeks, they fell into a new rhythm. Cole moved back into the bunkhouse to maintain propriety, but he took his meals at the main house. They worked together during the day, repairing fences, planning for winter, integrating the new hands they hired with the money from the cattle sale. Corinne reopened her medical practice from a small room in town, riding in twice a week to see patients. Cole never questioned it, never tried to limit her. He simply made sure her horse was ready and her route was safe. Slowly, trust deepened. One evening in early October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Corinne asked him the question she had been holding. When you asked to court me, what were you hoping for in the end? He turned to look at her, his expression serious. I am hoping for marriage, Corinne. A real one this time, built on honesty and partnership. I am hoping for a life here, together, working this ranch, and whatever else you want to build. I am hoping you will take my name and let me take yours in return, equal and permanent. I know it is too soon to propose. But that is where I am heading, if you will let me. She felt her throat tighten with emotion. I need time, Cole. I need to be sure you are not going to disappear again. He nodded. I understand. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere. She reached for his hand. Thank you for being patient. He smiled. Thank you for giving me the chance. A week later, a messenger arrived from town with urgent news. Harlan had filed a legal challenge to Star Ranch's water rights, claiming the original deed was invalid. The case was set for a hearing in 2 weeks. Corinne read the summons with cold fury. He is not going to give up. Cole leaned against the porch rail, jaw tight. We beat him on the drive. Now he is trying the courts. Do we have the original deed? Corinne nodded. My aunt kept meticulous records. The deed is solid. But Harlan has money and influence. He could drag this out for years. Cole looked at her steadily. Then we fight him in court, the same way we fought him on the trail. Together. She met his eyes and felt the last fragile piece of her heart settle into place. Together. The hearing was held in the Bitter Bluff courthouse, a cramped room smelling of old wood and tobacco. Harlan arrived with a lawyer from Denver, a slick man in an expensive suit. Corinne and Cole sat at the plain defendant's table with the ranch deed and a sheaf of supporting documents. The judge, an older man with sharp eyes, called the court to order. Harlan's lawyer stood and made his case, arguing that the original survey was flawed and the water rights overlapped with association land. He spoke smoothly, citing precedents and technicalities. When he finished, the judge turned to Corinne. Miss Bennett, do you have a response? She stood, heart pounding but voice steady. Your Honor, the deed is clear, and the survey was conducted by the Territorial Office in 1868. Star Ranch has held those water rights for 22 years without challenge. The association is attempting to steal legal property through intimidation and false claims. The judge studied the documents for a long moment. The association lawyer started to object, but the judge held up a hand. I have reviewed the deed. It appears sound. However, I am curious about one thing, Miss Bennett. Why did your aunt never formally record the spring's boundaries with the association? Corinne felt her stomach drop. She did not know the answer. Before she could speak, Cole stood. Your Honor, may I address the court? The judge nodded. Cole cleared his throat. Miss Bennett's aunt did file boundary records. They are in the association ledger from 1869. Harlan removed them 6 months ago when she got sick. I have a witness who will testify to that. The courtroom went silent. Harlan's face flushed dark red. That is a lie. Cole looked at the judge. Sam Fletcher was the association clerk in 1869. He is here today and willing to testify under oath. The judge looked toward the back of the room. Mr. Fletcher, is that true? Sam stood, hat in hands. Yes, Your Honor. I recorded those boundaries myself. I saw Mr. Harlan remove the page from the ledger last spring. I did not speak up before because I was afraid of losing work, but I cannot stay silent anymore. The judge turned a cold stare on Harlan. Mr. Harlan, destroying legal records is a serious crime. I am dismissing this challenge and ordering you to pay Miss Bennett's court costs. If you attempt to interfere with Star Ranch's water rights again, you will face criminal charges. Case closed. He banged the gavel. Corinne felt her knees go weak with relief. Cole caught her elbow, steadying her. We won. She looked up at him, seeing the fierce satisfaction in his eyes. We did. Outside the courthouse, Sam stood waiting. Corinne walked over and took his hand. Thank you. That took courage. Sam shrugged. Your aunt was good to me when I needed work. Figured I owed her. Besides, Harlan is a bully. Someone needed to stand up to him. Cole shook his hand as well. You need a job, Sam. You have one at Star Ranch. Permanent. Sam smiled. I will take you up on that, boss. They rode back to the ranch in high spirits. The threat finally lifted. That evening, as the sun set red and gold over the valley, Cole found Corinne on the porch again. You have been out here a lot lately. She smiled. It is a good place to think. He sat beside her. What are you thinking about now? She turned to face him. I am thinking that we have been courting for 6 weeks. I am thinking that you have kept every promise you made. I am thinking that I trust you, Cole. Fully. He went very still. Corinne. She took his hand. I am not saying I am ready to set a wedding date tomorrow, but I am saying I am ready to start planning for it. I want to marry you. I want to build a life here together. I want to finish what we started 4 years ago, but do it right this time. He cupped her face gently. Are you sure? She leaned into his touch. I have never been more sure of anything. He kissed her then, deep and sure, and she felt the last shadow of the past dissolve. When they broke apart, he was smiling. How does spring sound? After the winter, when the valley greens up again? She laughed. Spring sounds perfect. He pulled her close, and they sat together, watching the stars come out, planning the future they would build together. 2 weeks later, Corinne was in town seeing patients when a commotion erupted in the street. She stepped out of the small clinic to find a crowd gathering near the jail. A man on horseback was shouting, his voice high and panicked. Someone cut the fence on the Murphy place. The herd scattered. And there is a rider down. Corinne grabbed her medical bag and pushed through the crowd. Where? The man pointed north. 2 miles out. Hurry. He is bleeding bad. She ran for her horse, mind already sorting through what she might need. As she mounted, Cole appeared beside her on his own horse. I am coming with you. She did not argue. They rode hard, reaching the Murphy Ranch in less than 20 minutes. A young hand lay in the dirt near a broken fence, blood soaking his shirt. Corinne dismounted and knelt beside him, her training taking over. Knife wound, deep, probably punctured the lung. She tore his shirt open and pressed a folded cloth against the wound. Cole, I need clean water and something to use for bandages. He was already moving, pulling supplies from his saddlebag. The boy's breathing was shallow and fast, his skin gray. Corinne worked quickly, packing the wound, wrapping it tight, checking his pulse. He was young, maybe 17. She looked up at Cole. We need to get him to town. Now. He will not survive the ride. Cole did not hesitate. I will bring the wagon. Hold on. He rode back toward the main road at a gallop. Corinne stayed with the boy, talking to him, keeping him conscious. You are going to be all right. What is your name? His lips moved. Tom. She smiled. Hello, Tom. I am Dr. Bennett. You are going to be fine, but you need to stay awake for me. Can you do that? He nodded weakly. Good. Tell me what happened. He tried to speak, coughed blood. Men came, cut the fence. I tried to stop them. One of them had a knife. Corinne felt cold anger bloom. Did you see who they were? Tom's eyes fluttered. Harlan's men. I recognized the horses. She kept pressure on the wound, fury and focus warring in her chest. Harlan had lost in court, so he had resorted to violence. This boy had nearly died because of it. Cole returned with the wagon, and together they lifted Tom into the bed as gently as possible. Corinne climbed in beside him, keeping the wound packed. Cole drove fast but careful, every jolt making her wince. They reached town in 40 minutes. Corinne had the boy carried into the clinic and spent the next 3 hours working to save his life. She cleaned the wound, stitched the lung tissue, closed the incision, and watched his breathing slowly stabilize. By the time she stepped out of the clinic, exhausted and blood-stained, it was dark. Cole was waiting outside. He is going to live. Cole let out a breath. Thank God. And thank you. She leaned against the wall, suddenly shaking with reaction. Harlan did this. Tom saw his men. Cole's expression went hard. I know. I already told the sheriff. He is riding out tonight to bring them in. Corinne looked up at him. This is not over, is it? Harlan is not going to stop. Cole shook his head. No. But we are not going to let him win. We keep fighting. Together. She nodded, feeling the weight of it settle on her shoulders. Together. He pulled her close, and she let herself lean on him, drawing strength from his solidity. They stood like that in the dark street, holding each other, knowing the fight was not finished, but knowing they were strong enough to see it through. Over the next days, the sheriff arrested 2 of Harlan's men. They confessed to cutting the fence under his orders. Harlan himself was arrested and charged with conspiracy and attempted murder. The association, embarrassed and furious, voted him out. His power broken. He left Bitter Bluff quietly. A beaten man. The valley settled into uneasy peace. Winter came hard and cold, but Star Ranch was ready. The herd was healthy, the hay stacked high, the roof repaired. Corinne and Cole worked side by side through the short days and long nights, their partnership deepening into something unshakable. On a clear December evening, Cole asked her to ride out to the spring with him. They rode in comfortable silence, the air sharp and clean. At the spring, the water still flowed, ice forming delicate patterns at the edges. Cole dismounted and helped her down. There is something I want to show you. He led her to a flat rock near the water's edge, where someone had carved initials. CB and CC, 1868. Corinne traced the letters with her finger. My aunt and her husband. Cole nodded. She told me once that this was where he proposed. She said it was the happiest moment of her life, standing here with someone who saw her as an equal and wanted to build something beautiful together. Corinne looked up at him, heart pounding. Cole. He took her hands. I know we said spring, but I do not want to wait anymore. Corinne Bennett, will you marry me? Will you take my name and let me take yours? Will you build this life with me as my partner and my equal for as long as we both live? She felt tears prick her eyes. Yes. He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. It was your aunt's. She left it for you in her will. I have been carrying it, waiting for the right moment. Corinne held out her hand, and he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She looked at the worn gold, thinking of her aunt's long marriage, her aunt's strength, her aunt's legacy. Then she looked at Cole and saw the same strength, the same commitment. I love you, he smiled. I love you too. I have loved you since the first time you told me I was wrong and made me believe it. She laughed through her tears. That was the second day we met. He pulled her close. Exactly. They stood together by the spring while the winter sun sank low and the valley turned gold and purple. Corinne felt the weight of the past finally lift, replaced by the bright, fierce certainty of the future. They rode back to the ranch in the gathering dark, hands linked, hearts full. When they reached the house, Sam and Jericho were waiting on the porch. Sam grinned. So? You finally ask her? Cole dismounted and helped Corinne down, his hand lingering on her waist. She said yes. Jericho let out a whoop. About time. Corinne laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. We are getting married in the spring. Sam tipped his hat. Congratulations, Miss Doctor. You picked a good one. Cole pulled her close. I am the one who got lucky. She looked up at him, seeing the truth of it in his eyes. We both did. They planned a simple ceremony for late April, after the worst of the mud season passed. Corinne sent word to a few old friends, though not to her father. Cole invited the ranch hands and a handful of drovers he had worked with over the years. The whole valley was invited, an open celebration at Star Ranch. As the day approached, Corinne found herself surprisingly calm. This was not the frantic, fearful preparation of 4 years ago. This was solid and sure, built on hard work and honest trust. The night before the wedding, she stood on the porch watching the stars, and Cole came to stand beside her. Nervous? She smiled. Not even a little. He took her hand. Good. Because I am terrified. She laughed. Of what? He looked at her seriously. Of letting you down. Of not being the partner you deserve. Of making another mistake that costs us everything. She squeezed his hand. Cole, you are not going to let me down. I trust you. More than that, I know you. You are stubborn and brave, and you do not quit when things get hard. That is who you are now. The man who ran 4 years ago is not the man standing here tonight. He let out a breath. I hope you are right. She turned to face him fully. I am right. And tomorrow, we are going to stand in front of everyone we care about and promise to build a life together. Not a perfect life, a real one. With hard seasons and good seasons and everything in between. And we are going to keep that promise because we both know what it costs to break it. He pulled her into his arms. I love you, Corinne. She rested her head against his chest. I love you too. Now go get some sleep. We have a wedding tomorrow. The ceremony was held under the cottonwoods near the spring, the water bright and clear, the grass green with new growth. Corinne wore a simple white dress her aunt had made years ago, altered to fit her frame. Cole wore a dark suit, clean and pressed, his hair neatly combed. The minister from town led them through the vows, his voice steady and kind. Do you, Cole Carver, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part? Cole looked at Corinne, his eyes bright. I do. Do you, Corinne Bennett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part? She smiled. I do. The minister grinned. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Cole cupped her face gently and kissed her, soft and sure, while the gathered crowd cheered. Corinne felt joy bloom warm and bright in her chest. This was the moment she had almost had 4 years ago, but better now, earned and honest and real. When they broke apart, Cole rested his forehead against hers. Hello, Mrs. Carver. She laughed. Hello, Mr. Bennett Carver. He raised an eyebrow. I like that. She took his hand. So do I. They walked back through the crowd together, accepting congratulations, smiling until their faces hurt. Sam clapped Cole on the shoulder. You did good, boss. Jericho handed Corinne a bouquet of wildflowers for the prettiest doctor in the territory. The celebration lasted into the evening, with food and music and dancing under the stars. Corinne danced with Cole, with Sam, with Jericho, with half the valley. She felt lighter than air, surrounded by people who had become family, standing on land that was truly hers, married to a man who had fought his way back to her side. As the moon rose and the music slowed, Cole pulled her close. Ready to start our life, Mrs. Bennett Carver? She smiled up at him. I have been ready for 4 years. He kissed her again, slow and sweet, and she tasted the future in it, bright and wide and full of promise. They walked hand in hand toward the house, leaving the celebration behind, stepping into the life they would build together. Inside, the lamps were lit, the fire warm, the bed turned down. Cole closed the door and pulled her into his arms. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Corinne kissed him. Thank you for becoming someone worth that chance. They stood together in the quiet house. Two people who had been broken and lost and lonely, now found.